नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नमस्कृत्य चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयन्तीरये नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया उत्तमश्लोके Canto 1, text, chapter 8, text 8. Kantum Kritamate Brahman Kantum Kritamate Brahman Varakam Pratham Astitaha Paleve Vidavanti Uttaram Vivlam Kantum Kritamate Brahman Varakam Ratham Astitaha Paleve Vidavanti Uttaram Vivlam Kantum Kritamate Brahman Varakam Ratham Astitaha Kantum Kritamate Brahman Varakam Ratham Astitaha Kantum Kritamate Brahman Just desiring to start. Kritamatihi hasn't decided. Brahman, oh Brahmana. Dwarakam, towards Dwaraka. Ratham, on the chariot. Astitaha, seated. Palebhe, Vidhavanti Uttaram Uttara Valam being afraid. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. As soon as he seated himself on the chariot to start for Dwaraka, he saw Uttara hurrying toward him in fear. Translation interpretation. As soon as he seated himself on the chariot to start for Dwaraka, he saw Uttara hurrying toward him in fear. Purpose by Srila Prabhupada. All the members of the family of the Pandavas were completely dependent on the protection of the Lord. And therefore, the Lord protected all of them in all circumstances. The Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely upon Him is especially looked after by the Lord. The father is more attentive to the little son who is exclusively dependent on the father. Thus ends the transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Vasya Devasarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We are in the 8th chapter of first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, and we are in text 8. So, King Parishad saved in these prayers. So, we saw in the last verse that Lord was about to leave Dwaraka, and sages headed by Vyasadeva and others, Uddhava and many others, they all came to offer their respects to Lord Sri Krishna. And we also saw that how Lord Krishna also offered respects in return. And we saw how Lord acts exemplarily. That means he not only sets a system, but he also follows a system that he has set. Now, after offering respects and exchanging respects, now Lord is actually sitting on the chariot. So he just sat on the chariot and he's about to leave Dwaraka. So Gantum Kridamati Brahman. So Brahman. So this verse is actually spoken by Sutta Goswami, the sages of Naimisharanya. Specifically, he is addressing to Shaunaka Rishi, who is the head of the sages of Naimisharanya. So he's saying Brahman, oh Brahman, Sutta Goswami is addressing here Sukadeva Goswami, Shaunaka Rishi, and along with him the other sages. So here we can see that Lord is going back to Dwaraka. Now, one very important point to note is that although Lord is now seated in the chariot, he does not immediately go to Dwaraka. He spends some more time before he actually goes to Dwaraka. Now, why is that Lord, although he wants to go, he's staying somewhere else? Now, Lord is independent. He does not have to depend on anyone. He can decide and he can follow his instruction, or he can follow his desire independently of anyone. But we will see it will take a few more chapters before actually Lord starts to go to Dwaraka. The reason being the Lord, although is completely independent, is bound by his devotees. So just to please his devotees, the Lord stays in Hastinapura for a little longer. And he prolongs his travel to Dwaraka, especially to pacify his dear devotees Pandavas, his sister Subhadra, and others who were aggrieved by the calamity, by the atrocious war that took place in Kurukshetra. So this is one important characteristic of the Lord. He is very kind to his devotees, Bhakta Vatsala. So if one becomes a devotee of the Lord, one can see the Lord's sweet reciprocation. And it is said that where is Lord situated? He is situated where his pure devotees sing his glories, where his pure devotees are eager to render service to him. The Lord is always present there. Now, as soon as the Lord is seated in the chariot, he is seeing something Upalebhe, saw Abhidhavanti hurriedly coming. Who is coming? Uttara. Uttara, wife of Abhimanyu. Now she is coming in great hurry. And while she is running, she is carrying certain emotion. And the emotion that she is carrying is Bhaya. She is filled with fear. Now, this is a very interesting act of Uttara. The reason being, when we see devotees, we think that devotees means there should be no fear, there should be no struggle, there should be no trouble. Devotees means they should be free from all problems. But in fact, that is not true. Even devotees are faced by various sufferings. The best examples are Prahlad Maharaj. His own father troubled him so many different ways. That means, although Prahlad Maharaj is one of the Mahajanas, one of the 12 Mahajanas, a pure devotee of the Lord, who has got instruction from Narada Muni in the womb of his mother, yet he is undergoing so much suffering. Similarly, we can see in the life of Pandavas. They were close associates of the Lord. They were always present in the association of the Lord. Yet, they had to undergo so much struggle. Haridas Thakur, Namacharya, was constantly chanting the holy name of the Lord. Yet, he was beaten in 22 marketplaces. So, in this way, we can see it is not that the devotees of the Lord are free from suffering. Today, we were seeing Prabhupada's quote, Jalabuddha Diary. Prabhupada has not written anything, but as it was mentioned, perhaps Prabhupada was having a lot of heart pain. So, the pure devotee of the Lord who has broadcasted the glories of so much, yet there is apparently suffering, there is apparently pain. Unlike the pain of the materialist, unlike the pain of the non-devotees, the suffering, the fear, the anxiety of the pure devotees is very different. The Lord, when He puts devotees in a certain situation, it is meant to glorify them as how they behave. Lakshana means quality. Everything has specific quality. If you look at any material that we see around, it has got specific characteristics, lakshana. Just like gold can glitter, coal is black, microphone has the ability to amplify sound. So in this way, everything has a lakshana or a characteristic. Similarly, devotees also have a characteristic. And when devotees are put in a certain situation, the act that they perform demonstrates whether they are devotee or not. And when they are devotee, Lord does put devotees into certain situations only to glorify them. So here, Uttara is in a certain situation of great fear. But a similar situation also came to Ashwadhama some time ago in the previous chapter, when he was chased by Arjuna. So Ashwadhama was also running away from Arjuna on the back of the horse, and behind him Arjuna was also chasing. So there, Ashwadhama also was filled with bhaya. He was also very afraid. Oh, Arjuna is going to kill me. So he was also running. But that running is different from the running or the hurriedly coming of Uttara. On one side, Ashwadhama is running away from Krishna. On the other side, Uttara is running towards Krishna. The situation is same. Situation is fear. Fear of death, fear of some calamity that is coming up. But one is moving towards the Lord, another is moving away from the Lord. So this is very significant. Similarly, we all will be put in various circumstances, sometimes favorable, sometimes unfavorable. Both are mercy of the Lord. As we become devotees, the Lord engages in various situations so as to test whether we are coming out with divine qualities or are we demonstrating qualities which are against divine principles of the Lord. So, how is that some of the devotees are able to recognize this? And how is that some devotees get caught up in a circumstantial situation and forget the higher picture that the Lord has put them into? How do we see these things? So this is a very nice verse where Prabhupada is also explaining very nicely the purport as how Lord protects his devotees. And one may question, if Lord protects his devotees, why don't we see his protection? In fact, in purport, Prabhupada writes, the Lord protects everyone. Actually, that's a fact. From the time we take birth, we have no ability to live on our own. How the material world makes arrangements for a child to live in the beginning few moments is just miracle. How is that child is able to understand the world as the child is growing? Child does not know any language, but child is making sense. Oh, it learns very quickly. Oh, there is, if I fall here, I may get hurt. Okay, next time I should not do it. So Lord, as Paramatma, is guiding the living entities, is providing with the facilities, so many facilities, so that we are protected. Lord, as Paramatma, is giving intelligence for all living entities to live a safe life. Yet, sometimes we see that the Lord is not protecting. So, what is the factor that determines or that helps us to see the protection of the Lord? So, Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport, all the members of the family of the Pandavas were completely dependent on the protection of the Lord. And therefore, the Lord protected all of them in all circumstances. This is one very important point. To experience, to witness the protection of the Lord, the one important factor is completely dependent. To be dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Shemaya, the mercy of the Lord. Abhiraksham, the mercy, the protection of the Lord. To be completely dependent, and all the members of the family of the Pandavas, they were completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. You could see from the example of Draupadi how she took shelter of the Lord. How Arjuna, when he encountered this difficult situation in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, he surrenders to the Supreme Lord, takes instructions, and thus becomes freed from the struggle or the calamity and gets protection. And here we are seeing the example of Uttara. Similarly, we will see the example of Parikshit Maharaj. How he takes shelter, completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord through hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So, in this way, we can see that the devotees of the Lord, the pure devotees of the Lord, are completely dependent on the protection of the Lord. Now, Prabhupada also writes in the next sentence, the Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely upon him is especially looked after by the Lord. Now, what does it mean to be dependent on the Lord? If Lord is protecting everyone, but He is specifically protecting His devotees who are dependent upon Him, what does this dependence mean? So, people understand the word dependence in many different ways. Prabhupada explains in a couple of places what does depending upon the Lord mean. So, one common mistake that people do that depending upon the Lord means I don't have to do anything. I have to simply depend on the Lord. Lord will do everything, and I have to just remain quiet and peaceful and say that I'm dependent on the Lord, I'm dependent on the Lord, and do nothing. Prabhupada says this is not true. It is not true that we leave everything to Krishna and we say, I'm dependent upon you. No. That is not the meaning of dependence. Rather, Prabhupada says, dependence means to follow the instructions of the Lord. And how do we get that instruction of the Lord? In this case, we will see how Uttara offers prayers to the Lord and then Lord directly protects. Similarly, in the case of Arjuna, Arjuna was able to talk to Krishna and get the instructions. But how do we get instructions? So for that reason, it is said in Chaitanya Charitamrita that the devotee must be dependent on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So one must take instructions from Guru. Guru means who is teaching the Shastra and who is following the Shastra completely. Sadhus are also talking the message of the Guru and the Shastra and following the path of the Guru. And Shastras are nothing but the words of the Supreme Lord. So when one takes shelter of these three, that is Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And when one is following the instructions that are given by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, that means one is dependent on them. So, what is opposite to this? Opposite to this is that we want to act in a way which is whimsical, which is not based on Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. When we are not functioning on the basis of the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, we are acting independently. When we act independently, we don't see the protection of the Lord as much as the devotee who is following the instructions can see. As it is said in Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam sadaiva pajamiham. To the degree one surrenders unto the Lord, to that degree one sees Lord's reciprocation. So it is very important in our devotional life to make quick progress. To the degree we abide by these orders of the spiritual master, sincerely, seriously, we make quick advancement. And instructions of the spiritual master are not just limited to the morning program or the time we are in temple, but to all times. And especially when one is trying to endeavor and align one's all efforts and desires to please the spiritual master, then one is exclusively depending on spiritual master, because he's only following the instruction of the spiritual master. He's only trying to follow and execute the instruction of the spiritual master. That is a very safe position. And that is one of the reasons why the initial disciples of Srila Prabhupada, who took the instructions of Srila Prabhupada very seriously and tried to execute that, they could see protection of the Lord. When they used to do Harinam Sankirtan in Australia, the police would catch them and they would put them in jail. They would again escape and they would go to another place and do Harinam Sankirtan. But then again, police would go there and catch them. So devotees thought how to escape these people, what to do. So then, by Lord's mercy, they got an idea. Let's take a bus. We'll go from one city to another, they will not catch us. So they got a bus and they wrote big Hare Krishna. And then they started traveling from one city to another city. And by the time the police recognized they are in another place, by the time they are going to another place, they are going to another place. And they were escaping. Similarly, we can see how in Russia, when the devotees, when Prabhupada went and just met one person and just reached him to become Krishna conscious in just a few minutes, or maybe a couple of times he met in the few days he was there. And then how that one devotee became inspired by Prabhupada's teachings in just few moments of meeting. And then they used to chant secretly in caves, or read books, or translate books. And they were tortured, they were jailed. Yet they were protected in various ways. So the Lord's protection comes. Similarly, protection does not just mean always in external circumstances. Sometimes we think protection means some external circumstances which are very grave and we are protected, that is protection. But we will discuss another meaning of the word protection. But before we go there, I would like to say another meaning of dependence. So in a letter in 1972, Prabhupada writes, so a devotee asked a question. The difference, I mean, there's not exact description of the question that the devotee asked, but Prabhupada writes that Krishna consciousness or living a life of Krishna consciousness does not mean to lead a life of laziness. It means sometimes it is equated, dependence on the Lord means it is laziness. I'll remain idle. Prabhupada says, rather, one should use one's all intelligence and engage in the service and not to be worried about the results. That is dependence on the Lord. So we can go two extremes. Other extreme is that I am the sole reason for the result. Only my activity will bring the result, and I push on doing things, and that is what dependence on the Lord is. On the other side is that I don't do anything and I leave everything to Krishna and I'm dependent. Prabhupada says one must use one's intelligence, one must put one's sincere endeavor. At the same time, one must depend upon Krishna for the result. Similarly, we see in the episode of the advent of Lord Krishna where there is conversation going between Vasudeva and Kamsa. So where Kamsa pulls the hair of Devaki with his left hand, and with his right hand he is having a sword and is about to kill Mother Devaki, then Vasudeva and Kamsa, they have a conversation where Vasudeva is persuading Kamsa not to kill. In one of those places, Prabhupada writes that when there is a possibility to avoid death, one must use one's intelligence and endeavor to avoid it. But if there is no way to escape, then one should not worry about it. So, devotees does not mean that they do not use intelligence. Devotees does not mean that they do not put endeavor. While they put the endeavor, while they use their intelligence, they're completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Because the end, the Lord does not sanction is the fifth factor of success. There are 5 factors of success in Bhagavad Gita. And the fifth and the most important factor of success is Daiva. Without the sanction of the Lord, no work becomes complete. Although one will go on putting so many endeavors. So a devotee of the Lord recognizes this factor. While one is sincerely putting his endeavors, he also prays the Lord to the spiritual master. If you think this is appropriate, please make it successful. And even before calling it to become successful, one even goes and prays, if this is appropriate, can I act this way? Can I do this service? Or the service has to be given by an authority, then it becomes authorized. Otherwise, we may be enacting various services, or we might be doing various things, but they may not fall in the category of service. The service, in the sense, Chaitanya Charitamrita says there are 3 kinds of service. So, one is the bhakti, which is like neophyte, just beginning, where one is very new. So, one is doing some sort of karma without telling it to Krishna, and therefore it is doing karma yoga. Another one is very active in his mind, and therefore he is interested in speculation and so on and so forth. Therefore, he is attaching that ability of speculation and philosophical reasoning to connect with the scriptures or the Shastra, and thereby trying to understand the Lord, and therefore it becomes Jnana Yoga. Then there is someone who is very interested with mysticism. They are getting connected in some way with the Lord. Then that becomes Ashtanga Yoga. So these are like very preliminary stages of yoga, where people are just engaging somewhere or other with the Lord. Then another kind of service, devotional service, is mixed devotional service, where one is engaging in service with a certain fruitive intent. I do this service to the Lord, but I want something in return. I render service, but with a little amount of speculation. So this is called mixed devotional service. While it is better than no devotional service, some devotional service, then some devotional service is better to be mixed devotional service. But then there is the highest class of devotional service, which is called Shuddha Bhakti, the pure devotional service. In pure devotional service, the only intent is to please the Lord. Ankulyena Krishnanushilanam. There is no other intent, there is no other desire. The act of engaging in service is only to please Krishna. Even if that means the result is not favorable for one's own goodness. If Krishna is pleased, then one is fine. There is no other explanation. And how do we know if Krishna is pleased? So, Yasya Prasada, spiritual master has to be pleased. How do we know the spiritual master is pleased? When our authorities are pleased, we know the spiritual master is pleased. So, in this way, when we are working, we have to move from one stage of devotional life to the next stage to the next stage. Otherwise, we will not see the mercy that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants to bestow. What is that mercy that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants to bestow? Samarpayatam Unnata Ujjvala Rasam. He wants to give the highest mellows of love of Krishna. That is not very easy. So Bhaktim Shriyam, he is giving his own service, devotional service, how to render service unto him. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is teaching. But in order to come there, we need to give up two things, that is fruitive activities and speculation. How do we give up speculation? We give up speculation when we try to hear the what the authorities have to say, what my spiritual master has to say, what the Lord would want me to do. So we need to become conscious of these things. I may have a certain preference, I may have a certain thing to do, I may have a certain thing what is considered as right, but it is insignificant. Only significant thing is what my authority, spiritual master, the Lord wants. So when we become conscious in this way, then we hear the instructions. Otherwise, we are not hearing the instructions. As we are not hearing the instructions carefully, then we are not seeing enough protection of the Lord. So dependency begins, so protection comes from dependency. And there is another protection of the Lord, which is even more significant beyond the external circumstances. That is protection from a material contamination. Sometimes people ask, Prabhuji, you are in America, how are you managing there? There must be so many dangers to devotional life. How is that one is able to maintain? It's a very valid question, because from India, when we see Hollywood and various things, and we think, how is it possible to render devotional service in America? But the protection of the Lord from Hare Krishna Mahamantra is making it possible for one to remain protected even in these places. Not only in these places, even in the jungles of Africa, there are devotees who are chanting and they are being protected and transformed from their past habits. So this extreme protection of the Lord from the material contamination is easily accessible by simply chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So material contamination, that means to forget our identity as servant, the servant, the servant, the Lord. So it is very natural to lose that identity, because we are in the material atmosphere, we are influenced by the modes of material nature. But because the Lord is all pure, as soon as we associate with Him, the contamination goes away, the material contamination goes away. In the earlier ages, it was very hard. They had to perform various austerities, meditation for so many years, worshipping the Lord in the temple, fire sacrifices. So much of endeavor they need to do so as to associate with the Lord, get purified to associate with the Lord. Even before they associate with the Lord, they have to undergo a lot of purification. Only after a lot of purification, they become eligible to make that endeavor, next endeavor to associate with the Lord. But that is the great boon of Kali Yuga, that one can associate with the Lord, same pure Lord is so easily accessible in His holy name. And simply by chanting the Lord's name, by remembering Him, by remembering His holy name, and constantly chanting, one can remain freed from material contamination. This is the great protection of the Lord. This is not easy. To remain uninfluenced by the modes of material nature, by the material contamination, is not possible by any other means except by the association of the Lord. And the association of the Lord is possible in this age by chanting His holy name. Why? Because the Lord is all pure, Purna Shuddha. Param is all pure. So our business is how much we associate with the Lord. As we associate as much as possible, then we will see the circumstantial difficulties, the circumstantial challenges will not appear challenging, because the Lord protects us. Just like a child may see a certain difficulty, but the child is confident, my father is going to protect me. Prabhupada writes, devotees write to him. So in 1972, Prabhupada was again traveling to Australia and the ocean countries towards Fiji, Indonesia, and things. So devotees were planning his travel. And then they were kind of trying to have so many places they wanted Prabhupada to stop. Then they asked Prabhupada, is this okay? Then Prabhupada writes to them, saying that you can have me stop at Jakarta, but do not do things which is like too much of endeavor. Do things whichever are to be done, do it nicely. But if you want me to stop, I will stop in all these places. In the end, I'm dependent on the protection of the law. So while Prabhupada is assessing the situation and giving the principle by which they have to go. But beyond that, Prabhupada is saying, I'm willing to travel, I think that is appropriate, then dependent on the protection. Otherwise, it's not possible to live devotional life. We can become agitated, disturbed, in so many circumstances. So to be able to recognize the protection of the Lord is a very important principle. When we see protection of the Lord, we are not disturbed by circumstantial success, results, failures. We see as an opportunity to improve our service. We see it as an opportunity to become a better servant, better dependent. Maybe I'm not following the instructions somewhere. What is that is missing? The introspection begins. And then one becomes a better devotee. Prabhupada in the end writes, the father is more attentive to the little son who is exclusively dependent on the father. This is very important. It is actually very difficult to become helpless or completely dependent exclusively because we have so many sources of protection. We have wealth, we have family, we have various objects of dependencies which make us feel comfortable. So it's a great fortune if one is put in a situation where one is made to become more dependent on the Lord. While in the usual case, people would find such situation very troublesome. Oh, why am I put in such conditions? For a devotee, Lord is telling, oh, please give up all the dependencies. Actually, the word protection is quite often used after the 55th verse. In the 55th verse of Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter, Lord tells how one can understand him. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yashtatmi tattvataha. So, Lord says one can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. So, after this explanation that how one understands the Lord only by rendering devotional service, then from there, next couple of verses, I'll not read all the verses, but the next verse itself, the Lord uses the word mad vyapashrayaha, and Prabhupada translates as my protection, under my protection. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee under my protection reaches the eternal, imperishable abode of my grace. And even in the next verse, there is another word called matpara. And Prabhupada translates that as my protection. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So, Prabhupada, in explaining be fully conscious of me, Prabhupada explains that when one acts in Krishna consciousness, it does not act as a master of the world. Just like a servant, one should act fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. A servant has no individual independence. He acts only on the order of the master. A servant acting on behalf of the Supreme Master has no affection for profit and loss. Very significant point. Just like a cashier who is collecting money and who is giving away money in the bank, he has no attachment whether he is receiving so much money or whether he is giving away so much money. His duty is only to do that. Similarly, as devotees, our duty is to follow the instructions of our superiors, spiritual master. Profit or loss is not primary concern. Our main concern is to abide by the instructions. He simply discharges his duty faithfully in terms of the order of the Lord. Now, one may argue that Arjuna was acting under the personal direction of Krishna. But when Krishna is not present, how should one act? If one acts according to the direction of Krishna in this book, as well as under the guidance of the representative of Krishna, then the result will be the same. Prabhupada is explaining, it's like how would one act? One has to abide by the orders of Krishna, or as the instruction given in this book, or representative Krishna. So, the Sanskrit word matparaha is very important in this verse. It indicates that one has no goal in life save and except acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. So, and while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. This is perfect Krishna consciousness. One should, however, note that after doing something whimsically, you should not offer the result to the Supreme Lord. That sort of duty is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. One should act according to the order of Krishna. This is a very important point. That order of Krishna comes through the cyclic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master's order should be taken as the prime duty of life. If one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then his perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. So this is the great mercy of Srila Prabhupada, that we are able to access the true instructions of the Supreme Lord by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So when we abide by his instructions, we really try to please his desires and act follows orders, then we are actually moving towards perfection. We are doing that fully, and we are in perfection in Krishna consciousness. And yes, Prabhupada is also mentioning that one should not act whimsically and offer the result to the Lord. That is not a perfection of Krishna consciousness. Perfection of Krishna consciousness means first we need to hear the orders, we need to hear the instructions, and then we need to execute. In the mood of being a servant, not to be attached to the fruit of the work or the service that we do. So, in other words, when we become fully dependent on the mercy of the Lord, we enact our duties as we receive orders from the superiors, from the Lord, from the spiritual master, and from the Shastras. Then we are making progress in the direction of experiencing, witnessing greater and greater protection of the Lord. So Pandavas are exemplary. Uttara is demonstrating here as how he is completely dependent upon the Lord, while the same scenario Ashwatthama ran away from the Lord and he used his Brahmastra to save himself. He used his own abilities to protect himself. While here Uttara is completely dependent and taking shelter of the Lord, and it's a wonderful example of how pure devotees of the Lord are always dependent upon the Lord, and yet they carry out their act of devotional service. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
So, as you can, so basically, are you nuances. How do you differentiate between the mind and the soul? This is always my first word. How do I know it's my inner voice? What's the voice of the um,
This is a very good question. Actually, every devotee undergoes this. In fact, every individual undergoes this. As how do I decide between my thought versus the real duty of mine? So the only way we can know is we have to become conscious. First, we need to take shelter of the spiritual master. We must recognize that I'm not purified enough to know the right duty, the right act that I need to do. I'm not trained enough. Just like a child is not trained. Because child is not trained, the parents always tell, okay, you can't do this. You can do this. And if the child has to do something, she has to go to the mother and father, can I get $10? And they will ask, why do you need it? And they will say, I want to have ice cream. They will say, no, you just had yesterday, no ice cream. So similarly, we need someone who can guide us, who can help us. That means first we need to surrender, identify someone whom we can fully trust, who is truly knowledgeable, who has truly realized this knowledge of science of life and the ultimate perfection of life. The spiritual master is the one who can educate us in the science of life. So we must take shelter of him. What the shelter of him means, we have to hear his instructions. Just like Arjuna had a similar difficulty. My mind is saying, I will not fight. I will not fight. But then he did not decide, I will not fight. He simply put forward in front of Krishna, these are my reasoning that why I should not fight. Now you please tell me, I'm not able to decide what is the right thing to do. Please tell me what is the ultimate benefit. So similarly, we may have some thoughts, we must go to the spiritual master, we should pray to him and say, this is what I'm thinking, please guide me what I should do. And similarly, one must read Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita will answer one's questions. One must live in the association of devotees. In the association of devotees, devotees who have made further progress in their devotional life, they will be able to explain us more things. So, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. We have to take shelter of Guru, we have to take shelter of Shastra, we have to take shelter of Sadhus. So, when we do that, it will become clear. We don't have to speculate. Don't have to speculate. Otherwise, it is like I have a disease and I have to speculate. Should I take this medicine today? 3 times a day? 4 times a day? 2 medicines, 1 medicine? How will I ever know? I may feel one way in the morning this way and I would take 2, but maybe it is not going to be taken 2. So in that way, we cannot speculate and really figure out what is the right thing to do. But rather, we abide by Guru Sadhu Shastra, and when we consistently follow their instructions, by following the one instruction, the other thing comes to you, the other thing comes to you, the other thing comes to you. So it's like when you take first right, you're going closer towards destination. Then you'll get the next instruction, okay, take left. So sometimes we cannot follow all the instructions, so we get small instructions. But when we are ready to follow all the instructions fully, all instructions are also available, by which at once our misgivings can go away. But in short, taking shelter of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra will help one overcome the dilemmas or the dualities. Yes,
that helps. But just to, I mean, so basically what you're saying is, I totally get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's, I don't know how to say it, but it's just, should you show a lot of patience before we expect like some sort of like direct, guidance? Like, because like sometimes like you just have to like not necessarily like if you make a decision like all of a sudden, but like what I mean, like day-to-day things like what should I do, should I not? What you were saying is like basically it's a long process. It's not like like boom, like it just happens. Like, hey, but I'm just saying like day-to-day things like this. Just for my example, like right now I'm going to make some health. So I'm not sure what I should, go for like the medical, treatment, or like should I just like try to figure this on my own and see like, because the there's like no cure, like, for, doing things, or, like, this is what I'm going for, and the medical, where all they do is just, they just give you, steroids. They don't have, but I wanna like, be able to like, just get the answer from like within and see if there's, because obviously, I could, inner express is way more powerful than like, taking, like, how you said, taking shelter, like, and that's how I look at it. But like the materialistic world doesn't look at it this way. They're like, oh, you should go to a doctor. And I mean, it's been what, they're not able to diagnose me. They're like, they're just doing tests and like treating me like a, like almost like a rat.
So I have already undergone whatever you were speaking.
Yeah.
I went through a phase of that in the last few years. And yes, so as we were discussing earlier, the first principle is to take shelter of the Lord, is to follow the prime instruction that is for this age of Kaliba, is to chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That is our primary duty. So I would recommend to start with chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra as much as you can. And listen to Prabhupada's Kirtans. So if you play Prabhupada's Kirtan in home, and chant as much as you can, then you will see the blessings of Prabhupada, or Nitai, Radha Damodar, will fall upon you. Other things will be revealed in the course.
Thank you.
If there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Kandrashmas Bhagavatam ki